Through hubris, greed, and a desire for power and control, Wizards of the Coast has decided to try to deauthorize an agreement that third-party publishers have used to boost Dungeons & Dragons for more than 22 years. Today, we're going to talk about the whole fiasco that has been going on with the OGL 1.1, the OGL 2.0, and everything else. If you want to learn more information about what the OGL is, what's been going on, what has been happening with it, what you can do about it, I have a whole bunch of links down in the show notes below that you can click on, including the original Gizmodo article, which broke the news of the OGL 1.1 and the attempt to deauthorize the 22-year-old OGL 1.0a. My own blog article where I tried to summarize what's been going on and link to all of the most vital sources for this information. And I also have a Sly Flourish article that I'll be posting on Monday that is more focused on what you and I can do about this. What does it mean for you and I, the DMs who love D&D, who love playing D&D, and who love playing RPGs? What does this mean for us? What can we do about it? And how can we steer our games? That article is going to be coming out on Sly Flourish on Monday. I will be sure to link to it in the show notes below as well. Wizards of the Coast's betrayal of third-party publishers matters to everybody. It matters to everyone in this hobby. If you are a dungeon master, if you are a player, if you are a content creator, whatever you are in this hobby, Wizards of the Coast attempting to pull back a license that we've been using, an agreement really, that we've been using for 22 years to build compatible products for D&D. These are products that have boosted D&D in ways that Wizards of the Coast never would have been able to do on their own. By them doing this, it's affecting the entire hobby. And you can see it everywhere. There isn't a single YouTube channel that hasn't talked about this. If you go over to Reddit and you look at the D&D Next or the 1D&D threads where typically we all talk about how to run our games, they are completely inundated with threads about what this has done to the hobby, what this attempt to try to deauthorize third-party publishers' ability to write for D&D has done to the hobby. And it really matters. Even if you are just using the base content that D&D has, your DMs are able to pick up monsters and ideas from other books and other concepts from all of these other third-party publishers that have been doing this for decades. There are books like Tollus from Monty Cook Games, Crown of the Oathbreaker, the Midgard World book, Strongholds and Followers, the Tal'Darai Reborn book. All of these books, Wizards of the Coast is not going to publish books like these. They have their own line, they have their own books, they have their own intellectual property that they can focus on. And they can let the whole rest of the community build up D&D with all of these other kinds of products, some of them very niche products. Some of these are products that only a couple thousand, a couple hundred copies are going to sell that focus on something specific. Wizards of the Coast totally didn't need to do this. There was no need to try to hold back third-party publishers from being able to publish this kind of content. These third-party publishers are not competitors to D&D at all. Wizards of the Coast has their own products that they're putting out, and third-party publishers are putting out totally different products. The next biggest publisher that uses the OGL is less than 1% the size of Wizards of the Coast. Products like Ancestry and Culture helped move D&D into all new directions that Wizards of the Coast has taken years to even start considering. Ancestry and Culture is an adamantine bestseller on DriveThruRPG by Arcanist Press, completely changed the game, got really good ideas, and got lots of people thinking about how to handle the issue of race in D&D. Fantastic product. Could not have happened without the OGL. Wizards of the Coast's excuses for going through this process hold no water at all. They claim right in the beginning of their article that there are 3 reasons that they're doing it. Number 1 is we wanted the ability to prevent the use of D&D content from being included with hateful and discriminatory products. So who exactly are the ones that are creating these hateful and discriminatory products? Wizards of the Coast. Spelljammer had all kinds of racist stuff in there that was so bad they had to do a whole new print run of the book. So who exactly are they protecting us from? Second, they say, we want to address those who are attempting to use D&D in Web3, blockchain games, and NFTs. So what companies are they going to protect us from there? Oh, that's right. Hasbro, owner of Wizards of the Coast, is publishing their own NFTs. What kind of hypocritical nonsense is this? We don't want you publishing NFTs. Only we can publish NFTs. And third, they say, we want to ensure that the OGL is for the content creator, the homebrewer, and the aspiring designer. You might draw a little underline on aspiring. When you actually become a true designer, then they don't want you anymore. Our players and the community, not major corporations. Who are they kidding? Hasbro themselves are the ones that are trying to grow profit 50% over the next 3 years in their attempt to try to become Disney. Cynthia Williams, the vice president over Wizards of the Coast, said that they're under-monetizing players, that we're only getting DMs to buy stuff. We want to try to figure out ways for players to buy stuff. They're the ones that want to grow this brand into something enormous. And guess what? They'd already won. There's no competitor. There's no major corporation that they're boosting with this. That's not the risk. I think it's a common misconception that everybody thinks that Wizards of the Coast is just after money. My friend Teos Abadia actually did an analysis on how much money they would actually get if the original OGL 1.1 license had been put in place. How much money would third-party publishers have given to them? And it was like $4 to $8 million, which is peanuts. They're a $1 billion company. That's nothing. It was like they could earn that in something like 3 days. This has nothing to do with money for Wizards of the Coast. This has to do with hubris, power, and control. This is their desire to control the brand. They don't like the fact that a good chunk of the brand and a good chunk of the attention that's brought to it is brought to it by us, by hobbyists, by third-party producers who work out of their basement, just making products because we love this game. They want control over this game, and that's why they're doing what they're doing. Their statement is completely hypocritical. They do not need to protect the brand from that stuff. You know why? The OGL has nothing to do with the brand of D&D. You can't use the words Dungeons and Dragons or D&D if you use the OGL. It has nothing to do with the brand. It has to do with being able to write compatible stuff with the rules. And that's what they want control over. In trying to get control over third-party creators, Wizards of the Coast has caused significant damage to the brand of D&D. They didn't need to do this. They have a huge brand. They could have focused all on movies, TV shows, cartoons, video games, music, merchandise. There's so many areas that they could focus their attention on getting D&D out there into the public discourse and leave the game alone and let us all continue to boost up the game and build up the game and love the game and tell people we love the game. Have conversations with our neighbors about how much we love the game. They could have left it all alone. They could have sat there in their offices shooting paper clips with a rubber band, and they would have done so much better for D&D than what they're trying to do now. They are snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. They had already won. D&D Beyond is so popular. It is such a monopolized system that I can't even get my own players to stop using it. They'd already had everything they needed to have control over this brand, but they needed a little bit more. They still didn't like that there was this one last thing out there that let third-party publishers safely write products for D&D, and they went after that, and this is what happens. They alienated their biggest fans with this move. They had brand ambassadors, people that they had hired to promote One D&D, who went online on Twitter to cancel their D&D Beyond subscriptions. In 26 years, I have seen no outcry against D&D like this. There hasn't been a controversy about D&D this big since the 80s and the Satanic Panic. To quote Jerry Holcomb from Penny Arcade, "You have entered treacherous waters entirely of your own volition." They didn't have to do this. They made choices to do this. And they have caused, and what I think might be, irreparable harm to the D&D brand. Major third-party publishers are all pivoting away from D&D. As far as I know, no one has actually signed their contract to work with them. And everybody instead is figuring out how they can continue to work in the RPG hobby without them. MCDM and Kobold Press both said that they're making new RPGs on their own. They both announced that they're building their own RPGs that are going to be independent from D&D and independent from any sort of gaming license. N-World Publishing is looking at how to take Level Up Advanced 5e and break it away from the OGL. Paizo said that they're going to release Pathfinder and Starfinder once they get through their current print runs, that they're going to release both of those books with no license agreement whatsoever. And Pathfinder has said that they are going to fund a independently controlled open gaming license known as ORC, and a bunch of different publishers have said they're getting on board with this. This might actually make the hobby stronger in the end, but it's going to be ugly in the meantime, and it could suck all of the oxygen out of the room when it comes to Dungeons and Dragons. We can never trust Wizards of the Coast to do what's right for Dungeons and Dragons again. That's what they proved with this move. We had an agreement with them. The OGL was definitely a weak contract. If you talk to any of the lawyers who have looked into it, it was a weak contract. But what it was an agreement between Wizards of the Coast and third-party publishers that we would write compatible products for D&D and they wouldn't come after us in court. The reality is neither group knows exactly what is legal when it comes to publishing content like this. None of it has ever gone to court and been proven. One thing that we've seen, if you've watched and talked and listened to all of the lawyers that are talking about this, is it's pretty clear that it's possible we don't need any license agreement at all. The word is possible. We don't really know, and we don't know if they go after us or not. Is Wizards going to become much more litigious? I hope not, but they could. And if they do, what's the likelihood that a small independent publisher can withstand a lawsuit. We don't know how that's going to play out. It's uncharted water. The OGL was not a benefit that Wizards of the Coast was providing to third-party publishers. The OGL was an agreement between both groups that neither group would go after one another, that we wouldn't try to push this one way or the other because neither group knew exactly how it was going to play out. So what can you and I do about this? What can the fans of D&D do about this problem? Well, there's a few different things we can do. I recommend sending physical letters to the CEO of Hasbro, Chris Cox, and to the vice presidents that are in charge of this, which is Cynthia Williams, vice president of Wizards of the Coast, and Dan Rawson, the brand new vice president of Dungeons & Dragons. Send them a letter. Be polite, but be specific. Tell them how this makes you feel about the brand. These vice presidents, they're not thinking about books. They're not thinking about rules. They're not thinking about the publishing side. They're thinking about the brand. They're worried about the D&D brand. They're worried about TV shows. They're worried about movies. They're worried about video games. They're worried about the big picture stuff. Tell them how this makes you feel about the big picture stuff and give them a way out. Tell them what you want. And what we want is for them to not deauthorize the OGL 10A and ideally strengthen it. Make a OGL 10B that's strengthened, that says it's irrevocable, and then support that with a 1D&D SRD. That's what I want. Do I think that's likely? No. But that's what I want. And that is a way out. That's something they could do. They could do it today and it would turn everything around because the stuff they're doing right now is not helping at all. The other thing we can do is support third-party creators. You can do this if you're playing 5e. There's tons of great third-party products that you can pick up for 5th edition. I'm going to talk all about them on this show. I've talked about them on this show. We're going to talk more about that. You could try other systems. We're going to talk about 10 different systems that you can play today that either are similar to D&D or quite a bit different than D&D that you can enjoy with your friends. Support those products. A real big one is breaking our dependence on D&D Beyond. I've talked about this on the show before. D&D Beyond is an excellent tool. It's really easy to use for 5th edition, but it does not support any third-party products. We need to break our dependence upon D&D Beyond if we want this hobby to be strong. I'm going to talk about this more in the future. We're going to figure this out. It's going to be hard to do. It's hard for our players. It's hard for us. But if we can break our dependence on D&D Beyond, our hobby is stronger for everyone. It's stronger for us. It's stronger for our players, and it's stronger for the whole rest of the hobby. Most of all, remember that D&D does not belong to them. They may be the caretaker of the brand, but we own D&D. We own the books. We own the hobby. When we sit around the table with our friends playing this game, that has nothing to do with them. This may be their brand, but it's our hobby. D&D has suffered through catastrophic problems like this in the past and survived. It has survived for 50 years, and it's going to survive for 50 more. Wizards of the Coast can't destroy this hobby that we love. They can damage the brand, and I think they clearly have done so. They can alienate their own fans, and they've certainly done that. We have books that are 50 years old that we can use to play D&D. We have the hobby, and we can always run it. D&D is our hobby, and no matter what they do, they cannot take that away from us.